What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Clippers Latest, where we talk all things LA Clippers, quick, fast, and to the point. I'm your host with the most, Brandon Goggins, back here with another episode for you guys today. Hope that everybody is doing a-okay today. I'm going through it, y'all. I ain't gonna lie. It has been quite the weekend. I I actually got the opportunity to do something really cool. I got to go to the Basketball Hall of Fame. I know that I'm blocking my face, but yeah, I went to support somebody that I know was getting inducted, or somebody my mom knew, I should say. And while I was there, I got to meet some really cool people, see some really cool people, including a former Clipper and Mr. Paul Anthony Pierce. He definitely did not want to take a picture, but I could tell that he wanted to do it out of the generosity. But, I left him alone after that. I didn't annoy him, I promise. I respectfully asked, and then after he took it, I thanked him, and then I walked away and was, about my business. These guys were a lot more nice. They are not Clippers, but they have been involved in Clippers games. Those are some of the NBA refs. As you guys know, James Williams, a.k.a. Gucci Ref, and then Bill Kennedy, who people refer to as the GOAT. Forgot to include my picture with Scott Foster, the extender. He was also there as well. So that was really cool. And, I had to take a picture of James Harden. Mike D'Antoni, he got inducted, and as you know, he used to coach James Harden on that Rockets team for a few years, so he was in attendance. Did not get to meet him, but I did want to include that. So that was really cool. It was a really fun experience, but I got involved in some air traffic, I guess, for lack of better words. My flight got delayed, and I had to have a layover in Chicago that ended up getting delayed to the next day, which is the day that I'm recording this. So I caught a flight from Chicago back to where I live earlier this morning. And I came home, got to, I guess, rest a little bit. My house was hot as hell. But then I had work. So I'm extremely, extremely tired, which is very unfortunate because we have some we have some news that we've been waiting on talking about for the last 11 months. It's very huge news. And, I want to have the energy to be able to do that. But, I just wanted to give that preface. Wanted to preface that by saying that if my energy seems a little bit low, or if my eyes are red, or if my voice is gone or whatever, bear with me. But we have a lot to cover today as it pertains to things aspiration and investigation related, because after nearly a year of this hanging over the organization, there is a possibility that we may be finally getting some idea of where this thing could be headed. But I want to be very careful with how I say this, because there are two different things happening here. We saw what ESPN reported. They said that they had sources that said that the NBA's investigation, has found. And then there's the NBA itself, who is now saying what they're saying about that reporting. They're on two opposite sides of the spectrum. So we'll talk about both of those, but I want to start with ESPN's report, because if this is accurate, I mean, this is a huge development for at least Steve Ballmer and the Clippers. So according to ESPN, after an investigation that has now gone on for over 11 months, I'm saying over, I don't care if it's not met it. I damn near say over a year. But they reported that the NBA has not found evidence that Steve Ballmer directly funneled money to Kawhi Leonard through Clippers sponsors in an attempt to circumvent the salary cap. And obviously that's a big deal, because when you think back to what the original allegation was when this story exploded last year, it was that Kawhi had that $28 million endorsement deal with Aspiration. They had a major business relationship with the Clippers and received a $50 million investment from Steve Ballmer. And then the allegation was that essentially it was a no-show deal, that Kawhi was getting millions of dollars without having to do any type of work for him. And then, obviously the biggest question was whether this was a way for Ballmer and the Clippers to secretly give Kawhi some additional compensation outside of his contract for the NBA. Obviously, that put us in some hot water because if the NBA could prove that Ballmer and the Clippers intentionally used that party to secretly pay Kawhi, this could be a lot worse. But according to ESPN's reporting, investigators have not been able to establish that Ballmer funneled money to Kawhi through these sponsorships. Now, that doesn't mean that we're in the clear. It's important to note. The investigation has apparently expanded into other questions, including whether the Clippers introducing the Kawhi to team sponsors could have violated the league's cap circumvention rules. The NBA has also reportedly looked at whether the Clippers could be responsible for some type of failure to supervise involving team employees. The Clippers pushed back on that idea as well. They say introducing players to companies that have business relationships with the team is normal around the NBA, and that it's common for players and their representatives to ask teams to make those connections. And the Clippers, they also said that they didn't negotiate or dictate the terms of Kawhi's endorsement agreements. And Steve Ballmer, he's maintained the entire time that he was not part of the scheme, with aspiration. We know he famously said they conned me. He said that he was a victim of their fraud. He invested $60 million into the company, and after Aspiration eventually went bankrupt, Ballmer said that he lost that entire investment. Obviously, we know that their co-founder Joe Sandberg ended up pleading guilty to federal fraud charges involving hundreds of millions of dollars. And he was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison earlier this year. So after everything that we've heard for almost a year, the biggest takeaway from ESPN's report is pretty simple. The most serious version of this allegation, that Steve Ballmer was secretly funneling money to Kawhi Leonard to cheat the salary cap, has not been proven, which is great. But before we start celebrating, the NBA had something to say about that report, and this is where things start to get really, really weird. Because not long after the ESPN published the report, I feel like it was like within the same hour maybe, the NBA, they came out and publicly disputed it. Mike Bass, who is an NBA spokesperson, he said that the ESPN's article regarding the Clippers investigation contained, quote, numerous and significant inaccuracies. In the league, they also made it clear that the investigation is still ongoing and said that the actual results will be made clear once that investigation concludes. So basically, ESPN puts out this massive report detailing what its sources say, the NBA has and has not found. And then the NBA comes out hours later and is like, that's not what happened. You know what I'm saying? That's not an accurate description of our investigation. But what I find pretty interesting and rather confusing is that the NBA didn't say specifically what ESPN got wrong. They just said that it was inaccurate. So the questions begin to raise. Is the NBA disputing ESPN's reports that investigators haven't found evidence Ballmer directly funneled money to Kawhi? Is it disputing the report that the league and the Clippers have been negotiating a resolution? Is it disputing the potential violations ESPN says are still being considered? Or is it something else entirely? We don't know. And all they said that there were numerous and significant inaccuracies without identifying said inaccuracies. But ESPN ain't backing down. They responded by saying that it stands by its reporting and that it made numerous attempts to get comment from the NBA before the story was published. And the NBA acknowledged that it declined to cooperate with ESPN on the report. So it's just kind of, it's really weird because on one end you got ESPN saying, hey, we talked to our sources, we reported what we found, and we stand by it. And then you got the NBA saying there are major inaccuracies in this report, but we're not going to tell you what they are until the investigation is complete. And I feel like that puts everybody, following the story in a really weird position because who's right? These are, you got ESPN, who is a very established company, media company, who would not just go out and put out some random schmandom stuff, without backing its sources. Like, they literally will not do that. They will fire somebody for doing that. And I mean, I guess if it turns out that this is untrue, maybe whoever wrote their article could be, losing their job. They could be in jeopardy. The article was still up, so they definitely didn't like take it down or anything. But it's weird because why is the NBA saying that there is something wrong with it, but they're not going to say what it is? Um, it just puts everybody in a weird position because when ESPN's first report dropped, you could look at it as maybe the best news that we didn't receive since this investigation started. If the NBA spent 11 months investigating this and then couldn't find any evidence that Steve was funneling money to Kawhi, that would be massive development. But once the NBA itself comes out and says that there are a lot of things wrong with the report, you got to put an asterisk next to it until we know exactly what the league is disputing. So Clippers haven't been cleared. I guess we don't have the official findings, and the investigation is still very much active. But even with all that uncertainty, we're getting a much clearer picture of what could actually happen to Kawhi himself. Because one thing that I have been seeing people wonder about throughout this entire situation is what is going to happen if Kawhi, or to Kawhi, if the NBA does find that something improper took place. And based on the latest reporting, the worst case scenario people have been throwing around, do not appear to be where this is currently headed. Kawhi and his agent and business attorney Harrison Gaines, they've been in communication with the players' union over the past few weeks, and according to the reporting, there has been no indication that to Kawhi's side that his contract will be voided at all, which is huge for all parties because when this investigation first started, you saw all kinds of speculation about whether Kawhi's contract could eventually be voided, or if the NBA determined that secret compensation was involved. But right now, that's not what Kawhi's camp is being led to expect. He has maintained to the NBPA and the NBA and the league's outside law firm that he didn't have any type of involvement with the circumvention allegations. Discussions about possible consequences for Kawhi, they've actually been centered around something much smaller. Maybe having to pay restitution for improper benefits. Somebody mentioned that, in the reporting, the travel and lodging that the Clippers may have provided for Kawhi's representative and Uncle Dennis, as we know. That also helps explain something important about this investigation. I feel like this is much more than just the $28 million aspiration deal that we've been talking about. Investigators have also looked into whether Kawhi had another previously unknown endorsement with another company. Obviously, we talked about it. Pablo Torre reported that Kawhi had this sponsorship agreement with Daktronics. So the question, the NBA is investigating isn't just, did Steve Ballmer personally give Kawhi this $28 million through aspiration, but also what business relationships existed between Kawhi, the Clippers sponsors, and the organization, who's responsible for facilitating these relationships, what benefits did he or his representatives get, did any of that cross the line under the NBA salary cap rules. There's just a lot of questions at stake here, and that's why two things can potentially be true at the same time. The NBA could fail to find evidence that Steve Ballmer personally orchestrated some massive payment scheme or whatever you would like to call it. But at the end of on the other side, the NBA could still find another rule violation involving the Clippers or Kawhi. We just don't know yet. And the NBPA, they're watching this very closely. Executive Director David Kelly, I think is his name, said last month that he didn't think that there was like a there with this situation. And the union has a very obvious interest in how the league handles, the potential punishments involving Kawhi. And if this thing does turn into a legal fight between the league and the players union, that can make an already long investigation even longer, which is something we do not need. Um, but that would bring us, to the biggest basketball consequence of all, right now. Kawhi is still supposed to be heading back to Toronto, and that trade still has not happened. Yeah. This investigation is like messing up a whole lot of motion, bro. Like, it's affecting league businesses because we're still trying to complete a trade that both teams agreed to in June. Now we're in the middle of August and it's still not official. Like, that's kind of crazy. Has this ever happened before? I don't think it has. The NBA informed the Raptors that if they completed this trade before the investigation was finished, Toronto would have to assume the risk of any potential outcome that could affect Kawhi. And Toronto basically was like, all right, we'll wait. Raptors said that they would hold off until the investigation complete. And, that doesn't just leave Kawhi waiting. Brandon Ingram and Grady Dick, they were also in that limbo, and now they're stuck in it because, they're a part of this trade. Now, good news is if you're waiting for this deal to finally get done, the reporting says that the Raptors are, Kawhi and the Raptors are both operating as though the trade has already gone through or will eventually be completed. So it's not dead. It just sounds like it's frozen until the NBA figures out what they're going to do. But there's still no timeline for when that answer is coming because now we have all of these conflicting stories making things very, very complicated. And, we're running out of time. Silver said that he wanted this done before the season starts. Training camp starts in a month. Clock is ticking. And if this ends up going to arbitration, it could become even more complicated. An arbitrator could compel document production, witness testimony, and discovery. Then after a hearing, that ruling could be appealed to a 3-person panel jointly, appointed by the NBA and NBPA. That panel's decision would be binding. And only after that process could Adam Silver be authorized to issue whatever punishment may ultimately be on the table. So after almost an entire year of this investigation, we are still here and we are still not at the finish line. ESPN is reporting that the NBA ain't found no evidence of, the biggest storyline of this whole entire thing. Then you got the NBA saying that the ESPN's report contains numerous inaccuracies, but ain't saying what those inaccuracies are. Like, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo right now. Kawhi's side reportedly has not been given any indication that his contract is going to be voided. So he's chilling. He's big chilling, actually. I just saw him. Wasn't he in like China or something like that? He's chilling. But the investigation is still looking at other potential violations. And until the NBA finally puts an end to this thing, Clippers, Raptors, Kawhi, B.I., Grady Dick, everybody in between, everybody's stuck waiting. So at this point, I don't really see a reason to celebrate yet. But if ESPN's reporting about the Ballmer situation of this investigation does ultimately hold up, that is probably the biggest and most damaging allegation that started this entire scandal in the first place. But, they may not be able to prove it, and that would be a massive development, if nothing else. But who knows what's going to happen with this? I don't know. It's kind of blowing my mind. But I'm going to stop it here because I've talked about it a lot. I don't want to go over because I'm scared that I don't have enough storage. But leave your thoughts in the comments below about everything. It's crazy out here, man. I don't know. What do you think is going to happen? Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, make sure you hit that like button if you haven't already. And consider subscribing if you are new here, because we love to have you over here at Clip Gang. If you ain't Clip Gang, don't bang. I'm going to get on up out of here, y'all. Y'all be easy. Y'all stay sleazy. And as always, keep your capital P. We catch y'all in the next one. Y'all be smooth. Peace.